July 25, 1940. Off the coast of Malta, the British convoy, codenamed Substance, struggled through waters turned into a killing field. The ships rode low in the water, heavy with supplies. Malta was starving. Britain needed that convoy to break through. But somewhere out there, 3-engine Italian torpedo bombers were hunting, and they had already proven themselves lethal. The Savoia-Marchetti SM.79 looked like it belonged in a museum. 3 engines mounted in that distinctive Hunchback configuration, fabric-covered wings, fixed landing gear, open cockpits. When pilots first laid eyes on it, they called it Gobbo, Maledetto, the damned Hunchback. The British sneered at it. It looked weak, slow, fragile. Everything an aircraft shouldn't be in 1940. Yet by the end of the war, this seemingly obsolete design would sink more Allied tonnage in the Mediterranean than any other aircraft. More than the famous German Condor. More than the Japanese torpedo bombers. Just this one Italian plane. And the men who flew it did something no modern designer expected. They turned an aircraft, everyone, underestimated into a weapon that terrified the Royal Navy. This is the story of how the Hunchback hunted ships. The SM-79 began its life as something innocent. In 1934, Savoia-Marchetti designed it as a fast civilian airliner, 8 seats, 3 Alfa Romeo engines. The Italians used set speed records. It was fast for a transport, graceful even in its own way. But when Mussolini began eyeing territory, the Italian Air Force saw something different, a platform that could be adapted to war. The conversion seemed logical at first. The 3-engine layout offered redundancy. The fabric construction made it light. The Italian aircraft industry, always scrappy and improvised, saw possibilities where others saw limitations. By 1938, the first military versions were flying, the designation SM-79. The first crews called it reliable. Then they called it something more. By 1940, when Italy entered the war, the Hunchback had already proven itself in Spain during the Civil War. Italian pilots knew what it could do. What surprised everyone, the Italians included, was that it turned out to be one of the finest torpedo bombers of the entire war. The Italians developed torpedo tactics nobody else had perfected. Wave-top flying, low speed stability, the ability to thread through anti-aircraft barrages that modern fighters couldn't survive. The Hunchback had all of those qualities by accident. Its slow speed, once a liability, became an asset. The planes attacking it couldn't get slow enough to aim properly. Its small silhouette meant anti-aircraft gunners had to lead it aggressively. Miss by a foot at wave height, and you missed entirely. By July 1940, the Hunchback pilots of the Regia Aeronautica were conducting missions against Malta. The island lay in the middle of the Mediterranean, the gateway between North Africa and Europe. Supply convoys had to get through. The British sent them anyway, knowing the cost. The Italians knew what was coming. They had the Hunchbacks waiting. The crews of Savoia-Marchetti pilots had spent months practicing one specific skill, delivering a torpedo at 50 feet above the water while traveling at 120 miles per hour into a defended position. It sounds impossible. Dozens of other nations tried it. Hundreds of pilots died learning it. The Italians got good enough to survive it. The Substance convoy was one of the tests. 4 cargo ships surrounded by destroyers and armed trawlers trying to force their way through. The supply shortage on Malta had reached critical levels. Starvation was becoming a real possibility for the garrison. This convoy couldn't fail. But the Italians had sent 12 Savoia-Marchetti SM-79s, Each one carried a 450 mm torpedo. The attack came at dawn on July 22nd. The Italians came at wave height, approaching from the sun, so the anti-aircraft gunners were blinded. 2 ships were hit. Immediately, the crews fought fires. Anti-aircraft guns blazed away at the banking, weaving hunchbacks. One Italian pilot never climbed above 50 feet. His gunner fired a machine gun at the masts of cargo ships, while the pilot threaded between barrage balloon cables. They survived that run. Many others didn't. That mission, July 22nd, 1940, was the first serious blow. The blow, Hunchback landed on the British Mediterranean Fleet. The Royal Navy, which had ruled these waters for 2 centuries, suddenly discovered that this ungainly-looking Italian aircraft had more teeth than anything they'd faced from the air before. Over the next 18 months, the pattern repeated. Convoy after convoy was mauled. The Hunchback struck again and again. By the time the North African campaign shifted and the Allies gained air superiority, the SM-79 had sunk so many Allied merchant ships that Winston Churchill himself had taken notice. The Hunchback wasn't supposed to exist. It definitely wasn't supposed to be winning. The crews understood something the designers didn't plan for. This aircraft was honest. It did one thing well. It could fly low, fly slow, and deliver ordnance with precision. The fabric, covering absorbed shell splinters, instead of detonating them like metal would. The open cockpits gave pilots visibility no enclosed cabin could match. The fixed landing gear meant simplicity, less to break, less to fail over the open sea. By 1942, the Italians had modified several Hunchbacks to carry bombs instead of torpedoes. Some variants experimented with different engines, trying to squeeze out more speed. But the core design never changed. 3 Piaggio engines, that distinctive fuselage hump. The same steady, reliable platform that could absorb punishment and keep flying. The turning point came in the Malta campaign's second phase. The Allies had begun flying escort fighters, Hurricanes, and Spitfires to protect convoys. The Hunchback pilots couldn't outturn these faster aircraft. They couldn't climb away, but they had one advantage. If a fighter got on their tail, they could tighten a turn that would force the fighter to overshoot. At 70 knots, a Spitfire couldn't hold that turn without stalling. The Hunchback pilot would pull hard on the stick, and suddenly the fighter was behind them. Then the Italians made it back to base, limping but alive. The losses mounted. By 1943, Italian torpedo bomber crews were among the most experienced and most closely watched pilots in Europe. Every sortie was a calculated death run. Every pilot knew his odds. Yet they kept flying. They flew until the Italians surrendered. Then, incredibly, some of them flew for the Italian Social Republic, the Nazi puppet state, continuing the war even after their nation had quit. On July 23, 1943, a formation of SM-79s attacked a Gus convoy off Gibraltar. 4 ships were sunk. 2 more were set ablaze. The raid was a success. It was also one of the last major operations by Hunchback squadrons in the Italian Air Force. By autumn, the aircraft was being phased out. Newer designs were coming. More powerful engines, all-metal construction, sleeker lines, everything the modern Air Force was supposed to want. Yet when the statisticians began counting after the war, the numbers told a different story. The SM-79 had sunk more Allied tonnage than the German Focke-Wulf 200, more than the Japanese Nakajima B-5N, more than almost every other naval attack aircraft in the war, except the British Swordfish. This aircraft that everyone had dismissed as backward, as obsolete even before it flew in combat, had proven itself one of the most effective naval weapons of the entire war. The moral is not that old designs always work, it's that underestimation is dangerous. The Hunchback succeeded because Italian pilots were brave and skilled, yes, but also because the aircraft was honest. It didn't promise more than it could deliver. It couldn't be a fighter. It couldn't outrun a modern interceptor, but it could do exactly what it was designed for: fly low, carry a lethal payload, survive the journey, and come home. In the Mediterranean, that turned out to be enough. By 1944, the SM-79 was being retired. Over 1,300 were built across all variants, making it the backbone of Italian air power. Throughout the war, some lasted until 1952, flying for the new Italian Air Force in the post-war years. A few have survived to the present day. The aircraft that was supposed to be forgotten became, quite possibly, the finest torpedo bomber ever to take to the sky. The Hunchback hunted ships because its crews understood what the designers had stumbled upon by accident, that sometimes the simple solution is the best one. 3. Engines for reliability, a stable platform for accuracy, low speed for survivability, and ND. Pilots willing to die so that supplies could reach Malta. So here's the question that haunted naval strategists for the rest of the war. If this seemingly outdated aircraft could sink so much tonnage with so few losses, what would a modern purpose-built torpedo bomber have accomplished? What would have been possible if Italy had invested in this design instead of dismissing it as old-fashioned? Next time, we turn to Germany, where the Luftwaffe was asking the same question. They built their own answer to the Hunchback's success: the Heinkel He-115, a twin-engine seaplane that hunted the same convoys from Norway's freezing waters. It had better speed. It had better defensive armament. It had everything the Hunchback didn't. And yet, against all expectations, it never quite matched what the Italians had achieved. Subscribe so you see how one aircraft tried to improve on perfection and ended up discovering that speed isn't everything in a torpedo bomber's war. Thanks for watching.